Greetings and welcome to episode 52 of the Sustaining the Herd podcast, brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Andrew Wadle, and I'm joined in the studio as usual with my co-host, Brock Vitek.
Hey there, Andrew.
Hey, Brock, how are you doing? You know, if I was just a little bit more tech savvy, I'd say, and we're joined in the studio today with our special guest, and then I'd push a button and there'd be crickets chirping in the background because we don't have a guest today, but for good reason, and we'll get into that. We don't have a guest, surprise. So you're the last to know, Brock. But before we get into what we're going to talk about today, just want to welcome back our past and existing listeners. We really appreciate your strong and loyal following, and we always appreciate the feedback that we get from the things that you see or hear and learn. And to our new listeners, just a little bit more about what Sustaining the Herd is all about. And so at Agri-Services and Engineering, we look at sustainability from the standpoint of the proverbial three-legged stool. I'm going to have to come up with a new euphemism for that, Brock, because we've used a three-legged stool a lot of times, but there is indeed three parts of
I'll think about that one.
Yeah, let's think about that. So the first is protecting the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. That's more of the traditional view of sustainability, and indeed important. But no more important than number two, which is doing more with less, resource efficiency. That's a huge part of sustainability. If we can grow crops with, say, less water or less fertilizer, that is more sustainable. And then the last part, and I'd say, or the third part, which is I think the one that gets overlooked very often, is business sustainability. You know, everything is about people, and it's funny how we, in our episodes of Sustaining the Herd, Brock, how often do topics weave into the softer side of just people. People are a huge part of sustainability, and we love this industry. That being agriculture, particularly animal agriculture, and we want strong agribusinesses and smart people coming into this space, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit about Sustaining the Herd. So again, thank you for joining us. And so I'm going to start, although Brock's not our guest, I'm going to start with a question. Brock, what are you doing next week?
That's a great question. I will be in Detroit next week.
Oh yeah, what for?
Well, you know, Detroit being the garden spot it is, surprise,
Absolutely.
surprise, I'm not going to be there on vacation, actually.
Oh.
But I will be there with a great colleague of mine. His name is Andrew, if you haven't met him. And we will be attending the Biogas Americas conference hosted by the American Biogas Council, or more commonly known as the ABC, of which Sechi is a member.
All right. Well, for those, and it's funny, yeah, I will be there too. And you know, for folks who aren't familiar with the American Biogas Council, really, it is a trade organization. I always think a trade organization, in air quotes, being a lobbying organization, an educational organization for the biogas industry. And so Sechi, we're a huge supporter of the ABC. And there's a I don't know if it's called a sister organization, but a parallel organization called the RNG Coalition, Renewable Natural Gas Coalition, which Brock and I and Sechi were involved with, also attending their meetings, which also, as a trade organization, between the two of them, I don't know what our industry would be without them. Wouldn't you say, Brock?
Yeah, between the two of them, they have fantastic coverage over all things education, policy, lobbying, training, you name it. They're on top of it and do the industry a lot of good.
Yeah. So we're really pleased to support both those organizations. But yeah, as Brock said, next week is the ABC's meeting in Detroit, and what Brock and I thought we would do is just kind of run through that meeting, and not run through the meeting, but at least talk about what we're looking forward to at that meeting. And I think you might find that it just kind of might kind of give you a glimpse into all things that going on in biogas right now, or anaerobic digestion. and at least from our perspective. Is that about right, Brock?
I think so. Yeah, and I might also mention, Andrew, for our returning listeners who've been with us for maybe a year or two, you all might remember in the past we have recorded an episode on location at this conference, Biogas Americas, and we decided, it's time to change it up a bit. So that's why we're doing more of a preview this year instead of recording on location at the conference like we have the last couple of years. So hopefully this is something new and fresh that you all can glean something from.
Yeah, and boy, we're really going to go in the way back machine. Go back 52 episodes or 51 episodes to episode number 1, and lo and behold, who was our guest number 1?
No, episode number 2, but guest number 1.
Episode number 2, guest number 1. That's right.
Yep, that was Patrick Surface.
Yep, the executive director of the American Biogas Council. So, looking forward to seeing you next week and your staff, Patrick, at ABC.
Comes full circle.
Full circle. That's right. So, Brock, let's get right into it. Let's kind of go through the meeting, and what are you thinking about?
Well, only thing I have on my list is like wine and cheese receptions. I don't know about. No, I'm kidding. Those are fun, but that's not the primary reason I'm going.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there you go. Point number 1. What did we talk about? It was number 3. It was the people aspect. Right?
Uh-huh.
Probably one of the strongest aspects of the ABC meeting is what? It's wine, cheese, and beer, and talking with real people face to face about our industry. And so,
yes,
there we go, Brock. We already hit one of our pillars of sustainability.
Absolutely. And I'll expand on that a bit.
Yeah, please do. Go from there. I interrupted you.
All good. So we talk about networking and getting some great FaceTime with people. And I don't mean FaceTime on the iPhone, but face-to-face FaceTime.
Yeah.
And, it's networking with people, meeting new folks. But, it's always a pleasure to be able to not just see new faces, but see some familiar ones as well. This is one of a few times a year we might actually be in person with some current and past clients as everyone's gathering. So it's always great to catch up on current project work, ask how things are going on projects that have been completed, and also talking to our industry peers, whether in some cases that might actually be competitors who we're friendly with, or even other firms and subconsultants that will work under us, or we might work under them at times. Just some peer-to-peer networking and an opportunity to learn together. So it's just always a big biogas family reunion, is how I like to put it.
Yep, and when you look at that biogas family, like all families, boy, there's a lot of different characteristics in that family, right?
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people that do a lot of different things. And so
the Brady Bunch of biogas.
The Brady Bunch of biogas. That's right. A cornucopia of biogas people. And so what do we have? We have engineers, sustainability specialists. We have attorneys. We have bankers. We have people from all walks of finance. Mm-hmm. And so, boy, it's
operators and wrench turners, people who literally work with their hands on these plants.
Yep.
Everyone.
Yep. Every one of those projects, every project doesn't go off without these people, touching it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes some government people from government there as well. So it's quite a diverse group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the topic of meeting people and talking to companies, one of my favorite things to do is to go and walk the expo floor where companies have booths set up, and just fun to be able to actually see equipment in person, touch it, feel it, see how things work. Whether it's a pump or a mixer or maybe a little demonstration on a gas upgrading system, you name it. It's great to walk that expo floor and just actually see things in person that we often see on paper as we're designing projects, and to have some really good conversations with vendors that can be pretty productive for us. Yeah.
When you walk that trade show floor, if they don't have it, you don't need it. It's quite a comprehensive list of people, just like the entire group that I mentioned, as far as attorneys and bankers and equipment providers. It's pretty amazing. Is there is there anything, Brock, on the trade show that you want to be spending any particular time with?
Oh man, good question. I must admit, been trying to reach out to folks to set up some meetings, so I haven't looked at much at the list of exhibitors for the trade show yet. But it's always great to take a look at pumps and mixers. It's when it comes to these anaerobic digestion projects, and you're an ag engineer, you know a lot more about these pumps and mixers than I do, but that just seems to be, one thing where there are so many different brands, so many different flavors of this type of equipment that sometimes you just have to sort through the noise and try to better understand what fits which project. So it's nice to go and see that type of stuff. I always enjoy that.
Yeah.
But don't have any vendors specifically in mind.
Yeah. It's like having the Chevy, Ford, and Chrysler dealers all in the same block, even within a particular type or classification of pump.
Seriously, everyone's got their shingle hung up, and who do I go talk to?
Yeah, you can go see a couple different variations of the same thing for sure.
How about you for the trade show, Andrew?
Well, I think that one of the areas that, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit in the past on episodes, is where do we have as an industry, as a U.S. industry, have some gaps, and one of compared to traditional way of doing things in biogas plants. And one of them is feedstock preparation. And so Europe is miles and miles and miles ahead of us when it comes to feedstock preparation, particularly dry feedstock, because they things ran wild there for a while in digesting things like corn silage or quote unquote energy crops. And so they're really familiar with preparing, dry material to get it into anaerobic digestion. I will say, as much as we like looking at some of these European technologies, we always look at them very carefully, because usually the European equipment has a much different duty cycle. Here in the USA, things run for 25 hours per day. In Europe, they might run for 8 hours a week. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but the duty cycles are. But nevertheless, the technology, the concepts are there with the European technology, particularly as it relates to feedstock preparation. That is making the dry stuff wet. That is really a challenge. How do you make the dry stuff wet, especially in the world we're living in right now, Brock, of preparing feedlot manure, which can be 75% total solids. It's so dry it doesn't want to be wet.
How do you make the perfect manure milkshake?
That's what it is. Taking it from
unappetizing as that might sound.
That's right. Taking it from 75% to 15% TS quickly. So that's a big deal. So I'll give you name a vendor. Pumpe out of Germany. They're a great company. It's hard to go on a biogas plant in Europe and not find a Pumpe dry feeding preparation. And part of that as well would be say Vogelsang. It's another vendor, for taking material, making the big stuff small, getting the dry stuff wet, and sometimes that stuff's all paired together. So I'm looking forward to meeting with representatives from those companies and actually laying hands on some of their stuff.
Absolutely. You know what? I'll build upon that. You said making the dry stuff wet. That's at the begin. That's pre-AD. Now let's look after digestion. We need to make the wet stuff dry with some liquid-solid separation. I'll take that a step further, even thinking about nutrient separation. And for anyone who's been listening to us for maybe the last 10, 15, 20 episodes, they know that we talk about nutrient separation and how important nutrient management is on the back end of these projects. And while there aren't a lot of vendors, I'd say, who are making a big splash in that space at the moment, that'll be something I want to keep an eye out for on the trade show floor too, is nutrient separation solutions.
Yeah, it really is. It really is an area that in our industry that just remains very much underserved, and it's not because it's not because there's not a problem to be solved. It's just that it's really, really, really immense. And putting it into perspective, count the number of potash ships coming from Ukraine or wherever else and count the number of potash ships going back, right? And so we've got stuff going on with nutrients as far as partitioning them and separating them and getting them to places. So I think we're going to see some of that technology, Brock. You know, but some of it being in the form of like liquid solid separation and things like that. Usually, what would be the first step in what ultimately probably needs to be many, many steps of a nutrient separation system. And, you know, I tell you what else is really, you know, what I find really intriguing is these systems where we are, you know, taking digestate and stripping out the ammonia to make a concentrated ammonia product. I think, you know, the Thiosolv type, hopefully they'll be at the meeting, you know, they're making ammonium thiosulfate out of the ammonia that's originating in digestate. You know, those technologies I think are fantastic and fascinating, and I definitely want to learn more about that because they really do have a heartbeat.
I agree. Yeah, that's a critical component of these projects. So, Andrew, we've talked about, you know, the types of folks we'd like to talk to, some different companies. I think we've already started to move this direction, but I'd like to now get into things that we want to learn about, questions that we have now that we hope are answered by this time next week. Let's get into that. And I think we've started to wade into it a little bit. And after that, maybe we can get into questions that we would like to have answered, but we don't think will be answered as well.
Right. Well, and I want to take a step back as far as on the trade show floor, because there's something else that I hope our listeners are.
I might be getting ahead of myself.
No, it's okay. Just one other thing, and it's a huge thing, and the trade show floor is loaded with these people, is gas cleanup. How do you take biogas derived from animal manure and make it so that molecule of methane is indistinguishable from, you know, traditional sources of methane? Well, that's a pretty heavy lift, and so there's lots of companies that are at the trade show that are representing different methods for cleaning biogas. And you know, as a traditionally trained agricultural engineer, these are the things that we really don't learn too much about and nor asked to participate in those aspects of projects very often. But nevertheless, it's more and more we need to have some familiarity in this area. So I'm looking forward to just meeting with some vendors and just seeing what they offer and how those gas cleanup systems, you know, fit into an overall AD system.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's one that I kind of zoomed right past. So thanks for bringing us back on that.
So now, the question you asked, Brock, you know, some of the things that I'd like to, I guess I'll say, paraphrasing what you said, kind of learn. What would I like to learn? What I would like to come away with? Yeah. Well, it just so happens that, you know, the people at ABC are pretty clever. They do have their fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the industry. So some of the things that they're going to talk about are really top of my mind that I'm really glad they're going to talk about. And well, first of all, you know, the industry update is really, really good, you know, because they're in Washington, D.C. and they hear things related to policy and whatnot. And although nobody's crystal ball is completely clear, they do have one, and they're willing to share what they know from their meetings on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is I'm just really eager to hear about this maritime market business as far as how renewable natural gas, imagine manure from a feedlot in Nebraska could end up powering a ship going across the ocean. I think that is so cool.
It is. It's really cool. You know, that's what we've been hearing about for, oh goodness, over a year now, that's coming, that's going to be a market. And then the International Maritime Organization postponed a vote on some proposed regulations, so that, you know, delayed that market opportunity. And I'm excited to hear more next week, because that's been on folks' horizon, or on, you know, just of interest to people for quite a while now. So that's on my list too. Yeah,
and you know, ultimately as a free market guy, you know, I'm always tuned into these discussions from the standpoint of, well, I don't want it to be mandated,
No.
I want it to be a financially viable, financially attractive solution to these shippers.
Yes.
So I think that's really a big thing, and also under the category of, boy, we have to be careful what we wish for, because if people are going to use more expensive fuel, we maybe need to be prepared to be spending more for the goods that are being carried with that more expensive fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, back to the case of, this is like free market stuff, and not, we don't want these companies using renewables and then just getting subsidized to heck.
Yeah, I agree. Both of us could probably take 10 seconds to look across our desk or open a desk drawer and find something that was made in China and probably came over here to the U.S. on a ship, and that fuel price could be going up, right? So we could all be affected by it.
That's right.
Andrew, another thing I want to learn about is CO2, because we know that biogas is produced in an anaerobic digester. It's anywhere from 50 to 70% methane on average. And then that gas has to be upgraded to 99+% pure methane. Well, that other 50 to 30% is largely CO2, along with some other impurities, some other gases. And, traditionally that CO2 is it's called tail gas. It's vented to the atmosphere from the gas upgrade system. But over the last year or so, we've been hearing more about folks looking at CO2 as a value-added co-product of the RNG production process. Right. And I'm just really curious to hear what folks are saying about that next week. Might be some vendors that have solutions for it, but also I want to attend a session on it, and I see there is one on the schedule, because I think that's another revenue opportunity.
Well, yeah, and I think that's exactly the way we need to be looking in this industry, is that if the gas offtake is going to be horrid, we need to be finding other offtakes for other products, and the CO2 is a perfect example of another potential offtake.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
Yeah, so they're going to be doing some talking about the CO2 opportunities, and the other part that I just really enjoy, as far as where I'm certain we will learn some things, and that is the farmer panel. Now, of the farmer panel, it appears that there are two of the four participants are farmers. The other two work closely with farmers, but Greg Bethard from High Plains Ponderosa is on the program, and these guys have some big time operations in Southwest Kansas with ADs, and so I'm really eager to hear what Greg has to say. Mm-hmm. So that's the farmer panels are always fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing I'm looking forward to is just talking with developers, whether it's at the trade show or at the wine and cheese reception or wherever it may be. Although we work with developers as clients every single day, and we kind of keep a pulse on the industry via those clients, we'll be exposed to a lot of people next week. And I take all these topics we've talked about thus far in this conversation, and I would just love to hear the perspective of developers. What opportunities do they see today and tomorrow as it relates to feedstocks, offtake markets, co-products like CO2, you name it. I just love to hear their perspective, because they're the folks who are trying to put these projects together every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, let's go to the other point that you made, is what do you want to get from an ABC meeting that you feel like you might not? Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm thinking about that. I might have to ask you to speak first.
Well, funny you should ask me my own question. So
you did come up with it.
Yeah. Well, this nutrient separation business is, I think it's probably the number one issue facing animal agriculture, and that is, what do we do with the nutrients that are coming onto farms and feedlots and dairies? And again, think about it. Everything's a mass balance, right, Brock?
It is.
And count the the potash trucks coming in, count the potash trucks going out, and there tends to be a lot more coming in than there is going out, and so we need to get those nutrients in a form and get them transported off the farms. So anyway, I feel like it's an area that I as an engineer, I think of everything as a system. You can't talk about biogas without talking about the rest of the system, and nutrient separation and nutrient handling is a huge part of the system.
Yeah, it is. And that's on my list too. I really want to hear a lot about it and see some solutions, but I don't think we're going to quite get what we're looking for there. Yeah. And that's nothing against the ABC. They do a great job bringing everyone together, but it's just something the industry has not yet fully addressed, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time to figure it out.
Yeah. And the other thing is that comes to mind, I could probably think harder on this, but I said I really like the producer panel. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to, but we need more producer panels and more involvement from the people in animal agriculture. I feel like the landfill people tend to be represented at the at the ABC meetings, like the waste managements and whatnot. But it sure isn't. There sure aren't a lot of people from animal agriculture there, and I think those people would benefit by it, and I think the participants would benefit by it.
Agreed. Yeah, and one final thing for me, Andrew, is we know these projects cost a lot. CapEx is high, and while everything is high these days, inflation has really run up quite a bit over the last several years, and the cost of doing business has increased. I would really, really like to hear and see how folks are working diligently to be as capital efficient as possible on these projects. And I realize that is much easier said than done, but I don't think we're going to really see that. But we know that CapEx dang near kills projects every day. And I would like to see folks take a hard look at it. But I think that's another item on the wish list of it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work to try to figure that out.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one too. Also, because I think
maybe it's impossible.
Well, I think there's some proprietary issues there too, and that some people have it figured out. I think some people maybe not completely figured out, but some developers have it more figured out than others, and they might consider that their secret sauce. So,
Agreed.
But still, there's definitely some sharing that can be done, when it comes to economics of projects.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Andrew, we've covered a lot of ground here today, and boy, am I excited for Biogas Americas next week. It's going to be a great time. And we're going to learn some things, and we're going to have fun.
And for everybody who doesn't know it, you can go to American Biogas Council's website and learn more. The meeting is the 18th through the 20th of May in Detroit at the convention center downtown, and it'll be a good meeting. It'll be a great meeting.
Yeah, I must mention that when this conversation we're having today is published and hits the airwaves to the public, we will be in Detroit. So this will be coming out mid-conference. So for all of you who are listening, we're in Detroit right now, essentially learning. That's right. And we look forward to reporting back to all of you to share a bit about what we learned. So, as usual, thanks to all of you listeners, both new and returning, for choosing to spend some time with us today. And, Andrew, at the end of every episode, I almost always say, see you again in a couple of weeks, but I have an idea. And
what's that?
Maybe I'm giving a bit of a teaser to folks here. I think I'm going to say, I'll see everyone again in a week. How does that sound?
Oh, everybody's going to be very eager.
And then maybe again the week after that. Ooh. So, I'll do that. We'll change it up.
Too much is not enough, Brock. Too much is not enough for sustaining the herd.
So, for all of our listeners, thanks as always for joining the herd today. And we look forward to being back with you again in a week, not 2 weeks. Until then, talk to you next time.